Good afternoon, everybody. Jason Galaska here in the NACDA office, and thrilled to be able to bring this session to you today in partnership with ROI and our great friend Nevin and Keeple. Certainly it's important and long overdue that we take this journey together to improve in the DE&I space. Our collaboration with Nevin and her team and the conversations we've had over the last several months has been awesome, and we're thrilled to bring this to you. Since announcing the launch of the program last week, we've had tremendous feedback across the board. So we know we are heading in the right direction with this. The next step is to understand the platform and how the ROI modules can work for you and your staff and your members of your department. And that's why we're here today. So Nevin will take us through the ROI platform along with Noah. And over the course of the hour here, if you have questions, please feel free to enter those into the Q&A box. And without further ado, Nevin, thank you for your efforts in launching this partnership with us and welcoming the NACDA family with open arms and with open minds. So Nevin, take it away.
Jason, thank you so much for the warm welcome and the introduction. It means the world to me and to the rest of Team ROI to be able to be in this work and on this journey with NACDA, and all that you all have poured into us in this partnership and this work together is really special and meaningful, and hopefully will be felt throughout the athletic community. So thank you again for that. I want to welcome everyone to the informational webinar today hosted by NACDA and ROI. I also want to introduce my guy, Noah Knight, and Noah is a part of our client success team at ROI. Noah is a former college basketball player and actually worked at University of Missouri, Kansas City for a little bit. But we are so excited to have him on board with ROI. And without further ado, I would love to jump into today's webinar and get us started. The one thing I will say before we get started, though, is if you do have any questions, you're welcome to use the Q&A feature in Zoom or the chat, whatever you're most comfortable with. And Noah is going to be moderating the Q&A portion of the webinar a little bit later today. So thank you. A little bit about ROI. It was actually kind of my labor of love to the athletic community. And what is so, I guess, unique about it is that I love to travel. I had a chance to work with many institutions, many of you who may be on the webinar today. But what happened was that the demand for the work just became a little bit overwhelming. So I needed to create a platform that could be an extension of myself. And so I poured a lot of what I've learned from the athletic community over the past decade into return on inclusion. And so I want to take you through the platform today, talk a little bit about the partnership between NACDA and ROI, talk a little bit about the enrollment process, the implementation process, and how you can kind of maximize your return on the program in your athletic department. So thank you again for joining us today. For those of you who know me, I'm big on quotes, and this one is very much near and dear to my heart. If you talk to a person if you talk to a person in a language they understand, that goes to their head. If you talk to them in their language, that goes to their heart. And this particular quote by Nelson Mandela just carries so much power, and it just resonates with me because, it helps us understand that there's a world and a culture that exists beyond our own understanding. So, it really kind of aligns with the mission and value of ROI is how do we learn each other's language, right? How do we learn our student athletes' language? How do we center their experiences so that they become ours and that they're fully integrated? So part of that process is really leaning into it and hopefully owning the places within ourselves where we still need to grow, and figuring out what tools may be the most impactful or the most beneficial for not only you, but your staff that wants to be a part of this work with you. So many folks are asking, what is ROI? And to kind of take a deeper dive, first off, we are a sports-specific diversity, inclusion, and belonging platform. Okay, and the work, the content is geared towards the experiences of athletic professionals. So specifically, athletic administrators, coaches, athletic staff, everybody who kind of touches the student-athlete experience. We want these folks to feel fully equipped, prepared with how to deal with different lived experiences, how to prepare the athletic department to welcome student athletes across all backgrounds, and not just student athletes, but colleagues as well, right? Staff, coaches, administrators. I think part of the beauty in athletics is that it is such a diverse community, but we often don't talk about our differences, and there's ways in which we all show up that we need to kind of learn and develop a skill set to be better at receiving each other across difference. So the curriculum is really geared towards helping simplify some really complex concepts and make the learning process very practical, engaging. I also like to have fun, so I know oftentimes we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it has to be heavy and hard. That's not this program, right? This program is very serious, very direct and focused, but it's also about self-reflection and thinking about how we show up. What are our behaviors? How are our behaviors impacting the people around us? How are we making the people that we love and care about feel? And even more importantly, if we are doing things to inadvertently, harm anybody or cause somebody's experience to be less than our own, how can we then change those behaviors to be the type of inclusive leader that we want to be? Next, the platform is user friendly. We've also tried to make it very cost effective. And part of that is, we don't want you to have to think about, why this button isn't working right. We want you to just be able to follow the content and the coursework to help with your learning. So, we put a lot of time and attention into making sure that the platform was one that's easy to navigate. Self-paced learning modules. Now, this one's important because we want people at all levels of their understanding of knowledge, especially as it pertains to DEI, to feel as though they can connect with the content, that they can learn, that they can grow, that they can continue to build the skill sets that they're hoping to build. So we do offer, the online curriculum in a self-paced format. Learning is both asynchronous and synchronous. Specifically, as people are kind of going through each module and by themselves, then at the end of each module, they have built-in discussion guides where groups that are a part of the program together can then have a discussion about some of the learning outcomes from each module. And hopefully that'll give folks some more confidence in their process and also learn a little bit more about what some of the departmental expectations are. Next, we have standardized learning. So it's a great way for those of you who are trying to figure out how can I provide a resource to my entire department to help my people grow, right? We want to make sure that everyone's on the same page, everybody understands what's expected of them. And the reality is that, we don't just show up knowing what to do when it comes to diversity and inclusion and belonging. This is a learned skill set. So we need to provide an opportunity and resources for them to do that. The other piece too is that it's really hard to hold people accountable for what they don't know. So this provides a way for them to not only learn and build, but down the road, you can kind of reflect and lean on some of the teaching tools and learning opportunities that you've had in the past to really help coaches continue to think more critically about behaviors and ways in which they can kind of set expectations, not only for themselves, but for their teams as individuals who are part of the athletic department. And then lastly, for reporting mechanisms and really being able to track the progress of your staff and all participants. We do offer administrative oversight, and these are bi-monthly reports that will come out that'll let you know who's completed what, how well they've done. I don't necessarily like the whole idea of making anyone feel bad about what they haven't done or don't know, but I think it's rather an opportunity to really just check in with everybody to make sure folks are on the same page, that people feel comfortable with engaging with the platform and that they're learning the material and in a way for you to kind of level set and just kind of check, who needs a little bit more assistance and who might be, a little bit more advanced in the coursework and the curriculum as well. Um, the last thing that I will say before I click to the next slide here is that we can't do this work alone. When we created ROI, the dream was really to make this platform accessible to every athletic administrator, coach, staff in the entire country. And the only way that we can do that is with partners who are deeply committed to the work. So, it's such an honor to be able to partner with NACDA and really see the ways in which they want to use this ROI platform to help support and educate their membership as well. A little bit more about the NACDA ROI partnership. Last year, we actually, the NACDA D2 ADA Board of Directors went through ROI together. And the feedback from that group was overwhelmingly positive. And so as a result, it kind of helped our partnership grow a little bit more. And what we're about to kick off actually tomorrow is a new cohort with about 2 representatives from every NACDA affiliate. So we are really excited to engage this group over the course of the next 6 months as they continue their learning and participate in ROI as well. So moving on, just thinking about the module design, most of the modules are about 2 to 4 hours. Now, obviously, that's a big difference there, 2 to 4 hours, but some folks who are just kind of starting out in their inclusive leadership journey, it might take them a little bit longer to get through the coursework. Those who might be, a little bit further ahead, it might be a little bit shorter of a process, but still the learning equally as impactful. The modules are sequential in order, so starting with module 1, working your way through module 6, and we'll talk a little bit more about specifically the topics of each module in just a moment. The facilitator in each of the videos is myself. We have a lot of videos that will help kind of walk each participant through this process of self-reflection, real world scenarios, sport-specific case studies. There's also a participant workbook where folks can write down their reflective exercises and any parts of their process that they want to use to kind of keep notes. There's also, as I mentioned before, discussion guides at the end of each module that is for our group participants. So it's, again, excellent opportunity to take what you're learning individually and think about the application collectively. Then there's also knowledge retention quizzes at the end of each module, just to make sure everybody's on track and on pace with the entire department to make sure that, the learning is happening the way that it needs to. There's a self-assessment that is just for that participant to get a better understanding of where they are and kind of where they need to go or where they want to go in terms of their growth. And then lastly, we have the final assessment. And I'll talk a little bit more about the final assessment in just a moment. So when we look at the curriculum, there's 6 different modules. First, you can see here, diversity, inclusion, and belonging foundations. And the opportunity with module 1 is really to explore the roles of coaches and administrators in creating that culture of belonging, right? We want to make sure that, everyone's on the same page, that we all have kind of the same foundations and core skills as we begin this process. So a lot of this work is really centered on defining that process for each participant. Another big part of module 1 is learning why language matters. When I think about a lot of the conversations that I've had over the course of the past decade, most athletic administrators, most of the coaches that I've worked with have the best of intentions, right? They are in the business of supporting young people. They want to see their student athletes achieve, be successful, go on to do great things. They want to help them in that process. But the reality of it is that when it comes to certain things such as social and cultural experiences, coaches, administrators fear saying or doing the wrong thing. So oftentimes they don't say anything. And that's a real challenge because the impact isn't matching what the intentions are. So, we really focus on why this learning and this language matters and really help people develop the confidence to be able to engage. And then lastly, for module 1, it's really around developing a skill set and kind of a mindset as well to address those parts within ourselves where we still need to learn and grow and ultimately to lead inclusively. Module 2 gets into cultural competence. There's also another piece called covering and then managing relationships. And covering is really important because it's, I guess in terms of definition, it's when we hide these really salient parts of our identity when we don't feel like we belong, right? And so, all of us do it in different ways, and we take a deep dive into it in module 2. But the reason why it's important is because it allows each and every one of us to see how we enter the DEI conversation. I know sometimes people might say, well, look, I'm not a very diverse person, this is my experience. I don't really have much to offer, but the reality of it is that each and every one of us have something to offer. So, module 2 really takes a look at that. Cultural competence, again, is really our ability to see difference as an asset. So we'll learn more about what that looks like. We'll talk about team conflict and managing that conflict, but also creating that inclusive team culture, how to value different perspectives, how to affirm healthy interpersonal relationships and behaviors. So, module 2 is really a lot of fun in terms of really building that team culture and supporting each other as well. Module 3, breaking bias and decoding microaggressions. And this is really about developing an awareness of unconscious bias. And again, we all have unconscious bias. It influences our perceptions, our decision-making, the actions that we take based on both positive and negative associations. When I talk to people about bias, it's kind of the whole gamut, right? From who we, bias affects who we trust, who we think is capable, who we think is qualified. And I put that word in quotes because, I want to unpack that a little bit more in module 3. But it also translates to hiring, recruiting, evaluation, retention. So it's really an opportunity to become aware of the way that bias functions and how we can start to strategize or find solutions to address those behaviors. And then microaggressions is definitely a word that's come up more and more recently, especially a lot of student athletes really tune in to the ways in which we experience each other and microaggressions. The fascinating thing about microaggressions is that the folks who commit them aren't often doing it with any ill intention, and myself included. But the reality of it is that we don't understand how our behaviors are impacting the people around us. So I'll provide examples of microaggressions and ways that you can really start to change those behaviors as you become aware of them. Module 4 is all about unpacking racism, anti-racism, and privilege. We look at kind of the historical significance of these terms, how we consume all of these things, how we confront racist ideas, and also recognize how the forces of this affect all of us. The one thing that I think is really exciting is when we talk about privilege and how we can use privilege to support those who are harmed by racism the most. And again, when I say using privilege, I don't look at privilege as being a bad thing. I think there's a lot of effective strategies that even, our white coaches and administrators can participate and be full diversity partners. I've seen it over and over again in institutions around the country. And so, really highlighting these stories and sharing opportunities and ideas and strategies that have been really effective across the country is what Module 4 includes. Module 5, learning how to create LGBTQ plus and inclusive teams, and also include non-binary student athletes, trans student athletes, and exploring the intersections of all identities, being able to develop strategies to eliminate, some of the biases that perhaps we have or stereotypes that we have about people who show up in the world differently. Another piece of this, especially when it comes to some of the gender stereotypes, is really helping our young men understand, what it means to create a healthy locker room culture, right? And some of the differences between healthy and toxic masculinity and how perceptions influence those team and sport cultures. And so, a lot of good things in Module 5 as well. We like to wrap it all up in Module 6, looking at the inclusive leader and development and strategic planning. The inclusive leadership piece is really developing a deeper understanding of your core values and where your leadership skills are, and where you kind of fall on the inclusion continuum, and you'll learn about that in the platform as well. I really want you to be able to articulate your vision as a leader and create an action plan for both that personal and that collective growth. And then I think the other piece, which is exciting in terms of strategic planning, is reimagining or essentially redefining strategic priorities priorities with inclusion kind of infused in every aspect of the athletics experience. So those are kind of the 6 topics that we really address in the core modules. What I really love about these modules is that the content is evergreen, and we were very intentional about that. We wanted to make sure that the application could remain the same. And so I'm excited for you all to check that out. Once you complete all 6 modules and the final assessment successfully, which is just the culmination of everything that you've learned in the 6 modules, you will be awarded an ROI Inclusive Leader Certificate. And I think the cool thing about having a certificate like this is it really sets you up to be able to not only uphold institutional values, but to support the department and even your conference in a new way. And in addition to that, I think it's an excellent tool to be able to attract prospective candidates. You know, if you are going through ROI as a department and there's a job seeker or a candidate who's looking for, you know, a department where they can just, you know, go and be themselves and not have to worry about, you know, whether or not the school prioritizes DEI, this is an excellent way to show them that you do. And really, you know, when we think about what that department-wide commitment means, it helps redefine kind of a standard of care and psychological safety. To really make sure that everybody who's coming into your athletic department is socially and culturally proficient. And so, you know, I'd like to say it kind of next levels the athletic experience and really gives coaches, administrators, and staff kind of the competencies that they need to be able to lead effectively and more inclusively. So moving on, that's, you know, a lot about the curriculum, design, the coursework. So let's say you are ready to get started. What do you do? The first thing that you're going to do on the, there's a website that is made with our partners. So it's NACDA.ROinclusion.com. So on this website, you will see an enrollment form, and you can start by completing the enrollment form, and it asks for some, you know, pertinent information about what it is that you need, how many participants, that sort of thing. If it's not fully, if you haven't fully fleshed out those exactly what you need for it, that's okay. You can send it to us in in response to receiving this enrollment form. One of our client success managers, internally we call them CSMs, the NOAAs of the world, will reach out to you to really be able to initiate the enrollment process. Some of the information that they'll share with you are going to be excellent resources to have internal discussions with your colleagues. So, you know, I know oftentimes if you're signing up or joining as a department, you need to have discussions, whether it's with your DEI committee or with your athletic director or other administrators or even some of your campus partners. So we'll be able to provide you with the resources to be able to do that. Once you are ready to actually proceed with enrollment, there's several things that we're going to need. First, we're going to need the participant information, and you will have a form that we need you to fill out and return to us. The next thing is to be able to identify the key contacts in your athletic department. So we're going to need to know the group administrator, and this is the person who will act as the liaison between your group and our client success manager at ROI. And then we'll also need to know who's responsible, who your SID is for the press release, and then who's also responsible for procurement to send the invoice to. In terms of scheduling a launch date or an enrollment date, right now our queue is currently at about 7 to 10 days for the enrollment period. So that's 7 to 10 days from the time that we receive your participant information. In some cases, we can try to get it in a little bit sooner, you know, if you're trying to launch by a certain date, but that's just kind of a estimate of where we are. Next, the joint press release, which I think is really cool because oftentimes, one of the barriers to inclusion is communication. And so I'll, you know, work with a lot of administrators who say, hey, you know, our student athletes say they don't know what we're doing or, you know, what we're engaging in. How do you think we should change that? This is one way, right? If we, you can work with Kyle Chilton, who handles our communications. But if you're drafting a joint press release, that's something that you can then share with your student athletes and show your commitment as a department to the work of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So it's a great way to help communicate that with them. And then lastly, what you're going to need to start doing is preparing your staff for the program implementation. And this is probably one of my favorite favorite parts, because prior to creating what we call our ROI implementation guide, we had a lot of conversations with different institutions that had been through the program. And one of the things that they shared after, in sharing best practices was like how a guide would be helpful. So, we're really big on feedback, and anytime that you notice something that would be helpful to your experience, we want you to let you know, or we want you to let us know. So, so I have included some of the key steps in the implementation guide. So once we get all of that information back from you in terms of enrollment, then you'll receive this guide. And basically the way that this works is the first thing is for you to establish a working group of department thought leaders. Now, the one thing I will say about this is make sure that these folks who you are selecting for this process have expressed an interest in DEI. You don't just want to go up to, a random person because you think whatever their experience is, they'll know what to do or they prioritize DEI, but you want it to be folks who you have that relationship with, who you've talked with, who you've listened to their stories. They want to be engaged. They want to do more. If for whatever reason you're having a hard time identifying folks, I would recommend sending out almost like a form to the entire department and saying, hey, we're trying to select folks to serve in this role. Please complete this application. And then you'll have a whole process where you can see who wants to do more in terms of leadership. So once you do that and establish your working group, then you're going to create cohorts of everybody in your department, and you're going to assign all of your staff to each of these cohorts. The one thing about the cohorts is that you want to set aside time each month for the cohorts to discuss each module. So what I would recommend is about 1 hour a month, maybe, a set schedule. So whether it's, the first Tuesday of every month or whatever the case may be, but a time for all of these folks to get together in their cohort groups to have this discussion. The other thing about cohorts too, I know, the athletic departments vary in size, but I would recommend the smaller the cohorts can be, the more intimate the setting, the more comfortable people will probably feel participating. So if at all possible, I would recommend trying to keep the cohorts of less than 10 people so that, folks feel a little bit more comfortable communicating with each other in the small groups. So our working group members are going to be our cohort leaders. They're also going to be the ones who are helping facilitate these monthly discussions. Now, occasionally, if for whatever reason a working group member wants to include someone from the cohort to kind of co-facilitate, I think that's an excellent idea to pull in some of those folks who are part of the conversation, who are getting more comfortable with the material, and inviting them to, take more of a leadership role around some of these discussions is a great way to give them practice doing that and leading these conversations. The other thing too is that those are transferable skills. So, as they start to develop a comfort working with their colleagues, then they're going to develop a comfort having these conversations with their student athletes as well. After each monthly discussion, having some sort of mechanism for the cohorts to report out. So that could be, maybe after the cohorts meet for 30 minutes to an hour, then you have a whole group discussion. The entire athletic department gets back together, and then each of the cohorts report out. For the larger schools, I know that it's not practical in terms of time, so maybe there's some way that they can submit a document and say, hey, these were the key takeaways from our discussion. The other piece, when we think about the role of leadership, there's a real opportunity as you're working with these cohorts and also kind of setting the tone for the department to really develop some shared goals for everybody, and also shared expectations, right? Helping your coaches understand what's now expected of them as leaders in the department, as folks who are responsible for young people and really centering their experiences. So, excellent feedback from some of the folks who have already gone through ROI, and just, a great way to really make sure that you can maximize the benefits of the program with your staff as well. Next is our client success process. So basically what will happen is at the beginning of the enrollment process, you'll be assigned a client success manager. You might be lucky enough to get Noah. But if you don't, there'll be somebody else who's equally as fabulous and great, and I'm sure you'll enjoy working with. Your client success manager will kind of walk you through each step of the process. So once you're enrolled, this person will also be responsible for sending your group your bi-monthly reports, which I mentioned earlier, are really about tracking the progress of all of your staff. They'll also be able to answer any questions that you have as you kind of hire folks to the department. They'll be able to kind of add, remove participants due to those staffing changes. Excuse me. And any sort of evaluations or feedback that you provide, those folks will also be able to inform kind of our organizational leadership. So then we can then take that feedback and implement it into the ways in which we build our program and make it the most efficient for you. So cost, and I know this is probably the biggest question for most folks. I know, especially coming off of a rough year where a lot of departments were impacted fiscally by the pandemic. We tried to make the program affordable and we're keeping those rates. We want to make sure that, it's not only affordable, but also accessible. So these are the rates. And again, our membership is with the institutions directly. So if, your department is ready to get on board, these are our membership prices. For the Inclusive Leader Bundle, which includes all 6 of the modules, it does start at $200 per person. And then you can see as the number of participants increases, the price decreases. And the other thing as well is each year we are adding advanced modules. So, if at the end of your 1-year membership period, if you decide that you want to renew, you can renew at the same rate. Obviously have access to the advanced modules, but you'll also have access to the core 6 modules that you've completed as well. So this gives you a better sense of pricing. What I want to do now, without any further ado, is open it up for Q&A. I do see some questions coming through the chat. So I'm going to ask Noah if you can join us here. And we will move on to the Q&A portion.
Yes, absolutely. We do have a question that came through. It says, will there be an additional cost for the administrative oversight feature?
Great question. There is no additional cost for administrative oversight. That's something that we've built into the program and the package because we think it's an important part of the process to make sure that, athletic administrators, athletic directors are able to provide some sort of oversight and get a sense of who's moving through the coursework, how quickly, if there are any challenges, you can address them. So there's no additional cost for the administrative oversight.
Awesome. How do you engage staff who are reluctant to participate in ROI?
Yeah, great question. So, I think what's really important to me is that, I guess I don't think that there's anything wrong with reluctance. But what I don't want folks to do is get stuck there, right? Or assume that they don't have anything to contribute. And it kind of goes back to what I shared a little bit earlier, just in terms of all of us having different diversity dimensions and really important parts of our story that make us who we are. We have to find ways to personalize the student athlete experience. And so if there is somebody who might be a little bit reluctant, bring it back to the student athletes, right? This is where, there can be some curiosity, even though, as many coaches know their student athletes really well, they don't know everything. And so this is really an opportunity for them to kind of lean in a little bit more and really start to think about the experiences that exist beyond their own.
Mm-hmm. This question says, what is the price per individual module if you do not want the bundle?
Great question. So each individual module is $99. The individual modules aren't included in the discounted rate though. So, when you look at the price point here, the group membership starts at 200, individual modules are 99. So it definitely, you're getting 6 modules for basically, the price of 2 if you do the Inclusive Leader Bundle. The whole idea is that we want folks to kind of take the journey from module 1 through module 6. And so we have, discounted the price a lot just to make sure that folks can fully commit to the program and the platform.
What if your college has a contract with ROI through the Human Resources Department?
So you mean just in terms of who pays for it, or I'm not sure exactly what the question is.
Yeah, we might need a little bit more clarification on that question. If you wouldn't mind typing that into the Q&A as well. Just what you mean in more detail, that would be amazing.
And Noah, one of the things I will say too, you are welcome, or our clients are welcome to have the contractual language with whichever department at your institution you need to have it with. So if it's HR, if it's athletics, if it's another department, that's fine. We can work with you. But I do want to emphasize that it is a sports specific platform. And I think that's kind of the beauty in it, is that we are geared towards athletics. We are centering those experiences. And this is the community that we really want to support. If there are other campus partners that at any point want to be a part of the program, I would say absolutely, invite them to be on that journey with your department. But I do think it's extremely important for this to be something that is, a part of the athletic department, as in terms of the folks who are actually, participating in the program.
Mhm. How do you balance making a program like this mandatory for staff versus optional for those who really want to engage in this space?
Great question. So, I guess my recommendation would be, if if you're having trouble getting the majority of your staff on board, maybe starting with a smaller cohort initially to kind of go through the platform, and utilizing these folks as kind of, the drivers, right? These are the folks who are then coming back to the rest of the department and saying, hey, this was how it benefited me, sharing those experiences, helping or leveraging them to engage, the rest of their colleagues. I think it's very important. And I will say, I think NACDA is doing this extremely well, starting with that smaller cohort, and then, getting the rest of the department on board, or even, the rest of membership on board, is important, because then you have some folks who are able to kind of speak to that experience and help encourage their colleagues. So, if you don't want to mandate that, then that's okay. Start with the people who, voluntarily want to be a part of it. And we do have some clients who are going through the program that way as well, with the intention of getting the entire athletic department on board.
Sure. Can you continue to have access with modules if you do not renew after the year?
So unfortunately, no. That would be a very hard breakup for us. But you can, in that 1 year period, you can have as much access as, little access, but hopefully as much access as you want. Once you renew, you will have access to everything that we have on the platform. So the core 6 modules and also the advanced modules.
Another question says, so are most, including coaches, staff, student athletes, for the modules? And I assume you watch them on your own or as a group. So if that makes sense. So are most maybe discussions, including coaches, staff, student athletes, for the modules? And I assume you watch them on your own. So maybe referencing the asynchronous versus synchronous in the group discussions.
Yeah, so the modules are specifically for athletic administrators, coaches, and athletic staff. So, they're not built for the student athlete, although they are built with the student athlete experience in mind. So, folks are able. Our platform is mobile compatible. So you can watch it on your cell phone, you can watch it on your computer at your own convenience. But what I would recommend is the implementation process. So, after you give folks 3 to 4 weeks to watch it on their own, then have a discussion about what it is that they're learning, just so that you can kind of help them through this process and make sure that they're learning the things that you want them to be learning, and thinking about also the application then to their team. So, it's one thing to kind of go through each module and, at your own pace, and then talk to your colleagues about it. But then, the big piece is, how does that apply or kind of go back to the student athlete experience to really help them have the type of experience that the institution wants them to have.
Sure. Another question that ties into that, that somebody asked, was if it should include GAs as well, full-time staff only. What are your thoughts on that?
Great question. I mean, I think a lot of it would really probably come down to budget, but yes, I there's definitely a benefit to having everybody who works with student athletes go through this program, and if that's your GAs, interns, folks who are managers, I would absolutely recommend that they be a part of the process. A lot of these folks are the ones who then pursue, a long-term career in athletics. So, even if they're kind of starting, early on in their careers, this is something that is only going to help them continue to improve and grow as their, careers do.
Another question asks about like metrics, measurable outcomes. So it says, is there a set of measurable outcome-oriented variables that departments might expect to be impacted through implementation of the program? They are wondering about what should be measured pre and post implementation.
Yeah, so we have an evaluation that is a part of this process, but I would recommend, if there are different surveys. I know a lot of departments have done surveys just to initially gauge where their coaches are, where their administrators are, how much learning they need, what sort of programs or platforms they need to, implement or provide. So, we can support that process, but I think if there's something that's already in place for these institutions that are, ready to get on board and really trying to figure out what's next, I would recommend kind of managing that process on your own outside of the evaluation process that we have. Now we do have the reports, which kind of provide the analytics of who's going through each platform, how well they're doing, kind of what some of their scores and things like that are. So those are some analytics that can be applied to kind of the overall reporting structure. And then we have the evaluations kind of at the end of the program, which will kind of gauge their learning, and in addition to a self-assessment at the beginning, which is more for the participant. But in terms of if there's an athletic department that wants to kind of take a deeper dive, I would actually recommend inviting perhaps a researcher that might already be in the department or even in the institution to kind of be a part of the process too. One of the schools that we've worked with has an excellent team that's been able to put together a researcher for their process and really kind of gauge kind of their return and the success of the platform with their members, with their staff.
Yeah, so questions here are starting to slow, but we have a couple more. It looks like this one says, how can administrators prepare their department for return on inclusion?
Great question. So, the one thing that I mentioned before, just in terms of surveys, maybe if a athletic director or athletic administrator hasn't surveyed their staff yet, just to kind of see what some of those needs are, to do that first. And I think that's a great way to even kind of emphasize the need or the importance of a program or platform like ROI. I can probably guess that the results or the information that comes back from that survey is going to kind of even more so support the need to have a platform or a process in place. But the reality of it is that I recommend that everybody kind of utilize that data and utilize those metrics for themselves. So a survey's first. The second is having conversations with your staff, talking with them, finding out what some of their experiences are with their student athletes, with each other, find out where, they want to see, more support, what type of initiatives they want, what type of resources they need for their learning and their development. Also thinking about if there is a DEI committee, engaging that committee as well, and having them kind of being a driving force in that process. If there is a DEI committee in place, they could essentially be the working group for the cohort. So they could be, the cohort leaders, and help facilitate a lot of the conversations that are happening after each module. The other, I guess the final piece I would say too, Noah, is before we engage in this type of work, I think it's extremely, extremely important for athletic administrators to ask the hard questions of themselves first, and even as we think about, roles as leaders of an athletic department, as people with power, with access, those who garner respect, right? Your student athletes in many cases want to be you one day. Thinking about what your impact is, right? What is the impact of taking the steps to create a more welcoming and inclusive environment? And also, what is the impact of your silence? If you don't take those steps, and the ways in which, perhaps myself included, we all have inadvertently caused harm. So, kind of reckoning with that before we jump into this. And the last piece I will say is that it's so beneficial if we can kind of bring more of ourselves to these spaces. So, if you're in front of staff talking with your staff about, the opportunity that ROI provides, speaking from a personal experience and what the significance is to you. The chances are your staff just wants to get to know you better. They want to get to know how you think, why you're prioritizing this. And so if you can personalize that for them in a way where they can kind of see themselves in it and say, oh, she's doing that, I want to do that too. He's doing that, I want to do that too. Or I need to step up more as a leader because, our athletic director is. It's a great way to really be able to lean in and engage and connect, with your own people across difference.
Mhm. Another question says that it was mentioned that this is not intended for student athletes. However, they would like to start this program with their athletics diversity and inclusion committee, which makes up about roughly 10 student athletes. Would you advise against that approach if some student athletes participated?
So I'm going to assume that the majority of the committee is staff with student athletes, and I do think, if you have student athlete leaders who are really engaged, they're tuned in, they want to do more. Many of them probably see themselves working in athletics down the road. Yeah, I would invite them to be in that process with you. One of the goals that we have down the road is to create a program or a platform for our student athletes. So, that's coming. But the big thing, and the reason why we wanted to start with administrators and coaches and staff, is to really be able to lay the foundation to support student athletes. We don't want student athletes getting on board. There's a lot of momentum, and then, our administrators and our coaches aren't quite there yet, right? We wanted to give folks time to kind of process and be in it and really figure out, what they need to do first before we engage our student athletes. So, the hope is that that there is some mindfulness in that piece of it. If the student athletes are engaging, that with the committee, that other coaches and administrators within that same athletic department can engage as well, just to make sure that that learning is more holistic, versus just having this group go through it, and perhaps some of these student athletes getting on board and just running with it, but yet other folks in the department who feel a little bit more intimidated by the process.
Mhm. We had one more question come through about metrics and effectiveness of ROI. And are there specific metrics that you will use or that will be used in the future?
Yes. So as we grow, one of the things that we really want to do is look at kind of the learning and development part of it. We want to look at folks who have completed the entire 6 modules. We want to look at how many folks are kind of engaging with a group versus individually. And we're already tracking, that data. There's, other data that we want to track in more depth as well. So yeah, we are exploring, different types of metrics that we will essentially kind of turn around to the schools to say, hey, this is, these are kind of your statistics. And then I think the other piece to it as well is inviting the community to let us know, what it is that they, want to see, or what it is that they want to measure, because we have some, strong folks working with us, like Noah, and these are folks who are truly committed to this process. And so, we want to make sure that we can maximize your benefit in the program, your return, and also, give you the leverage that you need as an institution to then, have conversations with your campus leadership teams and talk about the effectiveness of the platform too.
We had one more pricing question come in, just for clarification. The bundle includes all modules or 2 modules?
Great question. The bundle includes all 6 modules. So, and the final assessment. So what happens is once you go through all 6 modules, you register for the final assessment, and then you'll get access to it. We just want to make sure everybody's completed the modules before they take the final assessment. And once you score out of this world, you'll get your inclusive leader certificate. So it's a great question.
I think that's it.
That's it.
Yeah, those are all the questions that we have.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Noah. Thank you to our wonderful friends at NACDA, Jason, Dana, working behind the scenes to make today happen. And also Bob, for your leadership. It's truly appreciated. We are honored to be partners. I'm so grateful that everybody tuned in today for this informational webinar. We hope to hear from you. If there's anything that you need, if you have any questions, let us know. The other thing I will say before we close out is that for those who attended today's webinar, we are going to have a lunch and learn office hours on Thursday, November 18th. So just keep an eye on your inbox. I know NACDA, the team at NACDA is going to send some information about the lunch and learn out. It's also going to be there's also going to be a link in today's NACDA daily review. So you can check for it there as well. But again, I just want to thank you for your time and attention, and we look forward to being on this journey with you. So everybody take care and enjoy the rest of your Monday.